Congressman Ritchie Torres, thank you for coming on this Thursday morning. Congressman Torres represents the 15th district in New York, representing most of South Bronx. So super excited to have you here. And yeah, I wanted to give it off to Max for the first question.
Well, Congressman, thanks so much again for coming on our show. One of the things that I've been wanting to talk to you about is the future of New York. My family was in New York for 4 generations. That's where we hopped off the boat. We were Red Cross refugees in 1890 from Ukraine. New York is where they landed. My grandmother was born in Troy. My grandfather was born in Buffalo. My mom was raised there. And New York doesn't seem to be this bastion of the future like it once was. And it seems to me like you have a plan for that. An abundance agenda, I guess you could say. But what do you see as the future of New York as a state and, of course, as a city?
Look, I found it striking that nowhere did we see a greater swing toward Donald Trump than in New York. And that was not a coincidence. That was a consequence of failing governance at the state and local level. The majority of New Yorkers feel we're heading in the wrong direction. We feel we're paying more and more for less and less. Our public safety, quality of life, affordability are declining. Our costs are rising. We've seen the mass displacement of working class New Yorkers. In the past 10 years, 1/5 of the young Black population has disappeared. So in the early 20th century, African Americans flee the South for the North in order to escape Jim Crow. In the 21st century, we now have a reverse migration. African Americans are fleeing the North for the South in order to escape the affordability crisis. And, reforming governance in a place like New York is not only the right thing to do on its own merits, but it's become a political and electoral necessity because in American politics, the loss of population means the loss of political power. And in the next reapportionment, we're going to see a massive shift in political power from the North to the South, from the Midwest to the Mountain West, from the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt. States like Texas and Florida could gain 4 seats. California could lose 5 seats. New York could lose 3 seats. Illinois could lose 2 seats. And so because of the politics and economics of scarcity in cities like New York, we're going to face a much more complicated electoral map in the 2032 presidential election. And so I'm viewing it not only in government terms, but very much in political terms as well.
Well, it's a really interesting angle to take. And I know that the recent NEPA ruling was something that you spoke on, but I don't know, make sure I say this right, but the 7-county infrastructure coalition versus Eagle County, Colorado. Can you speak a little bit more about that and how that's going to come into play with changing governance?
Yeah, so one of the cruelest ironies of our time has been the weaponization of environmental law, particularly NEPA, against projects that are good for the environment. I mean, there have been moments when the environmental review is longer than the construction itself. Where in Colorado, there was Interstate 70, where the construction was 5 years, but the environmental review was 13 years, almost 3 times as long. And in a rational world, the environmental review should never be longer than the construction. Take, Cape Wind was supposed to be the first offshore wind farm. It began in 2001. And after 16 years of environmental review and $100 million in expenditures, the project was abandoned. Or the most shocking example that I cite is, Puerto Rico. So Puerto Rico has the worst electric grid in the country. It's been so poorly managed for so long that 16,000 miles of vegetation was allowed to grow under transmission lines. So every time there are intense weather conditions, it causes massive outages, depriving 3 million people of access to reliable, affordable energy. And so I asked the operator of the grid, how long will it take you to remove vegetation, which is the cause of these widespread outages? And he said, if you impose an environmental impact statement, it would take 8 years. So it took us 1 year to build the Empire State Building. It took us 16 months to build the largest office building in the world, the Pentagon. But it's going to take us 8 years, not to modernize the grid, but simply to clear vegetation? Like, that's the Kafkaesque world of environmental review in which we have been living since the 1970s. I think the majority of environmental reviews last 4.5 years, and then a quarter of environmental reviews last 6 or more years. And so the Supreme Court's latest decision, to me, is an abundance revolution, not only in American law, but in American governance, because it will end the weaponization of NEPA to block and delay infrastructure. Right? It clearly states that courts should no longer micromanage environmental reviews, and that there's no longer a need for environmental impact statements that run thousands and thousands of pages. So I see the decision as an opportunity for governments at every level to fundamentally streamline environmental reviews and to make government more efficient. For me, the abundance movement is an invitation to the Democratic Party, right? If Republicans are the party of less government, we as Democrats should not be the party of more government. We should be the party of better and cheaper and faster government. And the latest decision on NEPA presents us with a historic opportunity to create a better and cheaper and faster environmental review process.
Well, Congressman, staying on that topic, you've been one of the leading advocates of the abundance agenda, going back years, really, even before the book's release. And so I'm curious, there's been a lot of discussion around the political viability of the abundance agenda. And I think everything you've just laid out very clearly, like the majority of voters would obviously find that ridiculous and would obviously like to get these projects finished and completed in their neighborhoods. But I'm wondering, a lot of these groups in question that have sort of faced the brunt of the abundance movement's attacks, they've been releasing all these polls in the last few weeks, trying to kind of argue that the abundance agenda might be nice for elites or whatever, but it is not necessarily a political framework. It's more of a policy framework. So I'm curious what you make of that, because I think there's a case to be made that a lot of the Democratic backlash has to do with the decline of blue-run cities, Democrat-run cities. And so is it kind of a trickle-down effect in your mind, where if we make these changes and improve the ability of these cities to actually get projects done, people start to realize that Democrats can govern? Or is it really a direct political message that you can run on and talk about these things directly? Or does it need to be framed in more of like a populist tone publicly in order to get the political support necessary to get it done? What do you make of the political viability versus abundance as a policy framework?
Well, first, I'm of the view that good governance is good politics, and one cannot separate policy from politics. If you govern ineffectively, you will lose elections. If you preside over the highest inflation in more than 4 decades, you will lose elections. If you mismanage the migrant crisis, you will lose elections. If you're fundamentally incapable of building the infrastructure that people need, you will lose elections. So the notion that the people deserve a government that works and a government that can deliver basic services and build basic infrastructure, that should be uncontroversial and universally accepted. And I find the backlash to be genuinely baffling. And, Mario Cuomo once said, you campaign in poetry, but you govern in prose. And abundance is principally concerned with the prose of governing rather than the poetry of campaigning. No one is claiming that we should utter abundance on the campaign trail, right? But the American people want to see a government that works and that builds. America was once a nation of builders. We built the Transcontinental Railroad in 6 years, the Hoover Dam in 5 years, 2,700 Liberty ships in 4 years. We electrified rural America. We built the Interstate Highway. We built the Kennedy Space Center. And abundance is saying we should restore America as a nation of builders. And that's a vision that resonates widely. And there's an attempt to portray the abundance movement as anti-union or anti-labor. I think the massive investment in infrastructure would actually be a boon to the labor movement. Like the labor movement would have no greater friend than America as a nation of builders.
Yeah. I mean, I think we agree with that here. Wanted to ask a question kind of piggyback on elections. We kind of saw us get obliterated with young men this last election. And a lot of people like to point to, sexism, racism, whatever it is. A lot of young men of color actually were some of the biggest shifts that turned away from the Democratic Party. How can we start winning them back? And I know there were some Democratic donors who were saying we need to spend millions of dollars and have the left's version of Joe Rogan, which we think is ridiculous. But hey, you want to come on the Brogressive podcast? We can maybe, have that out there. But how do you think we can start winning young men? I think it's, actually listening to them, talking to them. What do you think?
Well, we should stop scolding and scapegoating and shaming voters There's a story about Adlai Stevenson. He delivered a great speech, and one of his supporters approached him and said, "Mr. Stevenson, you're extraordinary, and every thinking American is going to vote for you." And he replies, "Yes, ma'am, but I need a majority of the American people." That kind of condescension is not only bad morals, it's bad politics. I once heard a political strategist said to me, he spoke to a focus group, and a member of the focus group described the Republican Party as crazy, but the Democratic Party as preachy. But if she had to choose between the two, she prefers crazy over preachy. And so I feel like we have to stop the condescension, stop the scolding and shaming and scapegoating, steer clear of the identity politics, steer clear of the culture wars, ask ourselves, what are the issues that matter to most voters, which I think are cost of living and safety, and then build credibility on those issues. That to me is the name of the game. Run on the issues that matter to voters and then build credibility on those issues. You might recall the famous ad that Donald Trump ran, "She's for they, them, I'm for you, or I'm fighting for you."
Yep,
In the
everyone
middle of
watched
the ad,
that.
and I might be misremembering it, but in the middle of the ad, there's a video of Vice President Harris coming out in favor of taxpayer-funded healthcare for transgendered migrants in prison, right? Which might be like two people. And the question I would ask is, why are we even talking about that issue? Let's speak about the issues that matter to the majority of Americans. Let's try to build a broad coalition that has the greatest amount of appeal to the greatest number of people, and let's focus on the issues that matter to most people. It's that simple. You don't need fancy consulting. You don't need to, we're not going to be able to create from up high, from the ivory tower of Washington, D.C., a left-wing version of Joe Rogan. That's just delusional. Let's just focus authentically on the issues that matter to voters.
Fully
I
agree.
completely agree. I have one quick follow-up on the young men thing where you're talking about Democrats being condescending. I think the recent Pete Buttigieg appearance on the Flagrant podcast has been really illuminating for me on that, where you're talking about the condescension. I think a lot of Democrats think that you need to completely adjust the way you talk when you go on these shows, and that you need to like dumb down, for lack of a better term, your rhetoric, or just start using all these bro-y terms to appeal. And I think that really represented that he goes on there and he's himself. He's very like policy based and very smart, clearly. And the people in the comments and vaguely the reception from Republicans has not been like, oh, this elitist guy, what is he even talking about? They are like, it's great to see someone who's smart and actually thinks I'm smart, because he's not dumbing down the way he's talking. And so I wonder, like, do you agree with that generally, where Democrats are kind of like trying to wear the disguise of young men instead of like actually just being themselves and going on these channels, and instead of trying to create their own Joe Rogan, just let's try to get Joe Rogan back a little bit on the left and make it seem like that's something we're open to, versus like attacking Bernie Sanders for getting his endorsement or something like that. So do you agree with that? And what's kind of your viewpoint of when, like, are you trying to go on some of these shows, and how do you approach that with different audiences?
I feel like you should be who you are. You should respect the intelligence of your audience. The majority of Americans are intelligent. And it's condescension to claim, well, if you disagree with me, it means you're a victim of disinformation or false consciousness or stupidity. I just find that all condescending. We should disabuse ourselves of those notions. But at the same time, we should speak like normal people. We should not use words like food insecure. Just say hungry, not unhoused,
Unhoused.
homeless, not like justice involved, like incarcerated. Like, let's
Latinx.
the language of the ivory tower and speak like normal people from places like the Bronx, and you will be well served.
Perfect. I know you got to go, so appreciate your time. Maybe next time we could, I know you have a lot of things to think about your future. We could do this maybe in Albany. We could film this in Albany maybe in the future. But thank you so much, Congressman. Have a great rest of your day.
Take care.
Thanks so much.
So what'd you guys think? I mean, I thought he came off as normal, which is a little, I think for a lot of people, Congress people, normal. I thought, he came off normal, and I really like his point about just speaking to people bringing up issues they care about. I know we talk about this on the podcast, but letting go of some of the culture war stuff that really does alienate a lot of parts of the country. And I really thought his insight on like young men was important, because we don't need to be spending millions of dollars to find the left Joe Rogan. No, just go speak to them like normal people, like Pete Buttigieg has been doing, other people have been doing. So I liked it overall.
I think
Definitely.
he's more normal than I am. I mean, I was like, wow, I gotta take notes about this. But no, but I mean, he was a good speaker. You know what I really did appreciate, which I think is really subtle. He stopped, and every time we'd ask him a question, he would sit there and he would think about it for a second.
Yeah.
Like he didn't just talk out of his ass, right? He just sat there and he went, like to process it. Like I can really appreciate that he actually carefully thought out what he was going to say and like what his response was. Like you can tell he put some effort into it.
Well, and I think the point at the end where he's talking about like, yes, speak like normal people, don't use these weird activist terms. I think that's a really like interesting way to look at it, where he's like when he's getting into the NEPA stuff, obviously that's not necessarily what he's going to campaign on, but I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just because we're all very tuned into that kind of stuff, but I thought he did a good job of where, like, if some random voters listening to him talk about it, like, it doesn't come off as too wonky, even though it's an incredibly niche, incredibly wonky subject, because he's not using that kind of like ridiculous activist language that talks in circles. So, yeah, I think he's very effective at that.
It's sort of like I've learned the key way to know if it's like, okay, I'm getting too wonky is if someone like my mom would just like start zoning out. That's when I know I'm like, okay, I have to start using like regular people speak.
Or sometimes
I
I'll
think he was
start
good with that.
zoning out when Max speaks.
And you were a congressional intern, you know what I mean? Like we,
Yeah.
dude, I remember like some of our debates. I'd like watch you. You're like, I would like start to glaze over, and I was like, "Belay, what do you mean you don't understand environmental impact statements?"
Well, and
And
I
I was
think
like,
environmental impact statements, he did a great job of like putting it in very concrete terms where anyone could be like, yes, oh, it went from
it
1 year to
shouldn't
7 years.
take
Like,
Yeah, it
yeah.
shouldn't take 15 years to build, to just to have an environmental review. I think something that he brought up was that I think a lot of people could digest, and that made sense to me, was, hey, sometimes these environmental reviews are taking longer than, the amount of time it takes to actually build the project. So like, what is happening here?
Well, putting it in context too was also kind of huge because like the Empire State Building that was built 100 years ago. Building should not have gotten slower in the 100 years since 3D printing and Amazon. Like I feel like that just kind of like logically like it makes good sense, and I feel like that was really kind of interesting how subtle and how easy he did it. It was so fluid. I was kind of like, oh,
Yeah.
like that makes.
Well, I feel like I'm a huge YIMBY nerd and have harassed many people in my life explaining it. But I feel like that's kind of taught me that yeah, in a similar vein, like, you could explain it by being like single family zoning, blah, 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 getting all, or you could say like, did you know in 70% of the country, like it's illegal to build anything besides like a cookie cutter single family home? And
There you
like,
go.
there's lots of ways to explain this where it comes off as like clearly absurd to people. Or when you're talking about some of these like overly stringent requirements and the everything bagel liberalism, like I think most people inherently on the left or right would be like, yeah, obviously that's ridiculous. It sounds like a parody of bad bureaucracy. So
It's
yeah,
like a framing issue. Like the way we frame it is like if we pitch it as, oh, like we're gonna abolish single family zoning and make it transit, or it's like at that point we've already lost people. Like people are
yeah.
just like, I don't know what that means. I don't care. If we just say,
I have
yeah,
a really specific memory of freshman year. Yeah, I think it was freshman year. I was like working for this campaign in like the Davis district, and it was like a Democrat running in the primary, trying to move on to top two against like a Dem incumbent. And we were trying to organize a debate on campus, and the college Democrats, I understand why, didn't want to host it because they had a relationship with the incumbent. But we ended up, because we needed an org to host the debate, which we ended up doing, was the college Republicans. And I had to go to one of the meetings to talk to them. And I remember like it was interesting. Like I was mostly just kind of sitting there like observing. But they were discussing at one point Newsom, some policy had announced, which was something related to like allowing empty hotels to be used as homeless shelters or just like affordable housing shelters for people short term. And they were all like anti it, obviously for Republican reasons. And I remember that I like raised my hand and finally like got involved. And I said, yeah, that's like fine, but I wish you would just cut a bunch of red tape in housing production and make it so we could just build the housing supply up so that we could reduce prices. And I remember very vividly them all being like, haha, I mean, that's a great idea, but Newsom would never do something like that. And I'm like, okay, well, that's like the radical Democrat position in California. And when you frame it in that Republican mindset, they were like, oh, I mean, that'd be great, but that's way too conservative for our woke California. So I don't
I
know.
think
Maybe that doesn't help us
uh,
much in the Democratic primary, but
I don't know.
general.
I think I agree to a certain point. It is we have a lot of Republican voters here in California that are very against like building more housing near where they live. Like
No,
Huntington
I think
Beach is
that's
like a
definitely true.
city in Orange
Well,
County
of
where
course they are.
that's like they've had some of the
But,
most resistant the state's gone from building more affordable housing or just
Yeah.
housing in general has
well,
been
of
like
course,
Huntington
that's
Beach.
owners of
of course.
homes, of course, are going to be
Well,
Yeah.
more like
it's
that.
that old joke of like who wants affordable housing and then who wants their home price to go down in value. Like, of course they
Exactly.
don't. So
So
how do you
it's a
reconcile those
tricky
two
like
things?
yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
simply
the
put, it's
reality
like,
for a politician is that if they were completely honest about that dynamic, I mean, it is a bit of a trade-off inherently. I mean, that's something they always have to kind of walk around and pretend isn't
well,
the case.
and that's like a good part of urban planning where like we talk about, I think it's like polycentric or monocentric cities. So like monocentric meaning like there's one central hub versus polycentric there's a bunch of little hubs. LA has a bunch of little hubs, so like instead of rezoning like the suburbs, which we don't like, we can add like a duplex. Nobody's saying put like a 20-story like apartment building in suburban like Santa Clarita, but like why not just rezone the dense parts of LA where like the downtown is and make that part dense and affordable, and then everywhere else it's like, no, you can still have like your single family home in Riverside. Like that's fine. Like it doesn't mean we have
Yeah,
to abolish
I
all
don't
these
know that
things.
there is much of a dense part of Los Angeles, but I like that
Yeah.
framing. I feel like
Well,
it's
but
all
it's
the
but like downtown, because like there really isn't a
yeah,
downtown LA, So
there
it's that whole
should
thing
be,
of like
but yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Like, could you imagine if
yeah,
LA was like Tokyo? It's like it's walkable if it had good trains. Like I said in a group chat the other day, and I meant it as a joke, but also was kind of like being serious. I'm like, no, you know what? Fuck it. If I'm ever put in charge of housing, like I'm making your neighborhoods walkable, affordable. Your trains are going to be fast. They're going to be cheap, and they're going to be safe. And like I feel like that alone is like, oh, I feel like that should be like the bare minimum.
absolutely.
Yeah, I think
But
it's
other than that, what else do you think about Torres?
yeah, I thought he was just I don't know, I thought he like even though we had limited time with him, I feel like I learned a lot from him. Learned a lot with his political strategy. He seems to kind of focus on a lot of bread and butter issues. And I think like housing is a bread and butter issue. It's like, hey, like I can't fucking afford to live here, and he is from New York City. So if anyone knows about like cost of living, it's him. And I think it was pretty interesting that he brought that up. It was like, hey, we
Yeah.
fucking lose because we didn't really talk about inflation. We didn't talk about cost of
Mhm.
living.
Well, and people always have sort of like pretended like abundance is this kind of niche, like elite thing where it's like, okay, great, but that's not the reason we lost the election or whatever. But really, yeah, it was a cost of living election. When you looked at a lot of the inflation stats, it was like, yes, a lot of
Exactly what it was.
inflation went down, but it was specifically that the housing inflation was like took up a huge percent of that,
Yeah.
like monthly percent increase. And so I mean, if we had addressed that, I mean, I think there's a plausible case to be made that inflation wouldn't have appeared so awful to everyone, and they would feel like it wasn't as brutal by
Yeah.
the time the election came around.
It's not even like, I feel like it's kind of like living in a different reality. Like if you don't believe that was like the main driver, which pretty much any data supports that it was, right? Like people voted because food was more expensive, gas was more expensive, and your housing was more, or your apartment or your house was too expensive. Like that, it's not even like just bread and butter. It's like the main staples of your life. Like it's very
Yeah.
simple. Your neighborhood didn't feel safe, your eggs were too expensive, your gas was too pricey, and your apartment rent was too high. It's really that easy. And to deny it just kind of feels like living in a different reality. So I guess this is my thing is just being from a place like that. I feel like, one, how did we not see this coming? Like I feel like this was kind of written on the wall. Like I feel like, I mean, you guys lived it. Like you remember like 2022 when like all of a sudden it's like it hit 9%. Like you're going to Target and shit's like $1 or $2 more, and you're like, hey, like what the
Yeah.
hell's happening? Like this shit was nuts. Like I remember like going to Target trying to furnish my first apartment, and I was like, yeah, I'm just not buying these things. Like I'm not gonna do it. Like I'm not paying $4.50 for whatever the fuck it was. Like I don't know, it was like a phone charger or whatever it was. I'm like, yeah, I'm just like this shouldn't be this expensive. Like I'm not buying these things. So I mean, it makes sense. It's just one of those things where like I don't know how we didn't see this sooner.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we're gonna do an episode probably a little broader and more focused on this. But I wonder if we should talk about, just while we're here, like some of the big news of the week. We should focus and do a full episode on this big, beautiful bill. And I feel like it's kind of gone under the radar. It's probably the most impactful thing so far of the first Trump year of Trump 2.0. But I think the big news this week, Elon Musk officially out. He left with a black eye in multiple ways. Little X was told to punch him in the face, apparently. Very believable and normal explanation. But yeah, what do you guys make of this? I mean, I do find it pretty funny how this is exactly what any of the like most committed resist lib would have predicted about 4 months ago. And I remember at the time I was kind of like, yeah, you'd expect that, but I don't know, maybe because he donated so much money, maybe Trump really just weirdly likes Elon or something. But nope, it was exactly what you could have expected to happen.
Real quick,
He's moved on. So
yeah,
what
something
did you guys make of
that
that?
I was reading. I forget which source it was, but I guess insiders were saying this was during like after the election. Trump, so Elon would tell Trump like, "Hey, this is how the votes are going to come in," because he had like all the satellites and he had like a lot of these voting centers. He had a lot of like people in Pennsylvania, especially. And he was like, "This is like we're going to get votes from this county first, and then it's going to go this way. The numbers are probably going to look like this." So there was this theory that like Trump legitimately thought like Elon had won him the election, like
I
legit,
believe it.
because the way like Elon was explaining how the night would go and the night went exactly how Elon said. Trump legitimately thought, hey, maybe this guy like did something to help me out. Like, I don't know what he did, but these numbers are matching up exactly like he said. There was that theory out there, and there were some insiders who were also talking about that. So
I
I think
love
that
that theory.
that also may have waned off a little bit. And also, I did read that so Elon had recommended Trump a certain, I forgot the guy's name, for to be head of NASA. I forgot his name, but Elon really wanted this guy to be head of NASA. It was like one of his friends, and Trump was like playing with it. And I think he like nominated him at first, but then he dropped him because there were some concerns about some other shit. So I think Elon got a little pissy over that. And then also the electric vehicle tax credits. I think that is also something that is getting phased out. He's probably pissed off about that.
Well, it's funny you bring up the like voting systems thing, or that Elon had some advanced model. I think that's a great point that it's not like he actually did, but that Trump's kind of an idiot and took it that way. Because the only other time I've heard about that thing that you're talking about is I remember that there was a clip I saw on TikTok or something of Joe Rogan, like probably a week after the election. He was talking about that exact thing, and he was like talking about how insane it was. Like Elon, he had all this insider data. He knew that Trump won like 4 hours before they called the election. And I was like, so did I. I'm on election Twitter. It's not that hard. It was pretty obvious. Like, if he was making it out to be this like crazy insight, which by the way, if you like only watch CNN and you're not on election Twitter, like I could see why you would think that, because I remember watching it during the election and they're acting like there's all these unknowns, and it's like if you go online, it was very clear where everything was going and where each state was
Yeah.
going and everything. So
Well, because it's
yeah.
basic data science. Like it was just you watch the numbers come in and it's like, okay. You could even watch, like, I think it was what's his face is Nate Silver's like dial, when it was like percent chance of like her winning. It's like within a
Yeah, like
couple
literally
hours, it
the New
was
York
like, yeah,
Times dial. That's all you needed. Yeah.
yeah.
Which, by the way,
Well,
I still find it ridiculous. They don't show that on TV ever during any of the election coverage or anything like
I
it even.
honestly probably because it doesn't get as many views, because it's a lot easier to have like the flashy graphics and be like, oh,
Mhm.
New update, and it's like
Well,
10,000
probably
votes drop.
also because it like lowers views, because they're like, oh, it's an 80% chance. Why would I, or 90% chance? Why would I watch? They have to keep this
Yeah,
facade of
just
uncertainty.
keep tuning it up.
But so what do you guys see like coming at, like I probably could have predicted, like, or any resistant could predict that Trump would eventually sour on Elon, kind of he would exit the administration. I don't think I expected him to immediately go so anti-Trump directly on Twitter and be so like, what do you call the bill? Like,
Oh, big like pile of bullshit or something like that, or like the death
yeah,
bomb or whatever it
something
was.
like
It's
that.
a
And
nomination, like abomination. He just
yeah,
straight
some
out.
like disgusting abomination, and that anyone who voted for it should be ashamed. And I mean, we've seen some Democrats use those quotes. So what do you guys make of that? Were you surprised by how
I'm not, just
anti-Trump he went?
because. No, I'm not, just because like I feel like this, like the writing was on the wall. Again, like you said, anybody could have seen like a breakup coming up soon, but like just based on his behavior, right? It's like you're spending all this time with this person. He's like, oh, I love him. He doesn't like leave. Like, you remember that quote where he was like, oh, like I love Elon. He's always around. Where is Elon? He's always here. It's like, yeah, he was like his little like pen pal, or like not pen pal, like his little like it's like his backpacker. He followed him around everywhere. I'm sure got annoying. And like, I guess more importantly, they just have two different like paths that they want to take. Like, Elon, like again, for all this stuff he gets shit on, is like, no, he still makes like electric cars and like climate friendly stuff and whatever. Like he wants to be, Mr. GDP go up
Yeah,
and
he's
debt
a
go
pretty
down and all
smart
these things.
guy. Like he is.
He's not stupid. And
Yeah.
and when we act like he's an idiot, it's like, when leftists do that, it's like you're just being a smarmy douche. Like you're doing yourself a disservice by doing that. But like Trump wants to go here, right? He wants like tariffs on everything. He wants reindustrializing America. It's like Elon did that. He built a factory in America. He actually made industry in America and did it in California of all places with Tesla. But the way Trump was going about it is like it's hurting his business. So like the tariffs and whatnot, the bad optics, plus all the work that Doge has done, assuming even like a third of it is correct. Like let's say they saved $40 billion. The budget bill is going to like what? It was 2.8 trillion or something like that. Like
2.4
yeah,
was the latest.
it's going to undo all of it. And so it's like at that point, I'm sure Elon's probably like, dude, what the fuck? Like, what was the point of that? Because he really does seem to believe that the debt is an issue, and he's right. Like,
But it's so funny. It reminds me almost like the fact that they take no lesson from this. It reminds me almost of the Jeffrey Epstein, some of these conspiracy stuff. They got what they wanted. The dog caught the car. They have Dan, whatever Bongino from Fox News is like now a deputy FBI guy. And he gets in there and he's talked about how there's all this like deep state stuff and the conspiracy people were like, finally, we're going to fix it all with Trump, like all the QAnon stuff. And then he gets in there and is like, oh, actually, Jeffrey Epstein really killed himself. And like, actually,
It's funny to see the reaction to that.
yeah. But it reminds me of that, where it's like they've been saying that actually, really, we could balance the budget if we simply like rooted out all this fraud. Like, it's not actually that we have to cut real things for people or raise taxes. And very clearly, like Elon had full reign, probably more than full reign, because he did a bunch of unconstitutional stuff and got reversed. And yeah, like you said, even if you take his most generous stuff, what was it, like 40 billion? That's pennies on the dollar. So
yeah. I mean, he was claiming it was like 175, but like a lot of the stuff, I think the Times, like they checked like 10 of the contracts and like half of them
even if
were
it was,
overstated.
that would be very not much. Like that wouldn't
No,
be
it's
that
nothing.
much. It's probably over a 10-year period too. So
Yeah, exactly. When it's like, and at what cost? Like, I think that's the other thing too, is when people don't really weigh trade-offs, which I think like that this goes for, both sides. Like, oh, we can do Medicare for all, but it's like, okay, how much is it going to cost?
Mhm.
You don't talk about that. Or which like that, I'll take, hey, let's give everybody health insurance over, hey, let's destroy like the economy for no reason. But like,
yeah,
you
at
cut all
least if
these
you're going to
research
do
grants down.
some like potentially inflationary or deficit building thing, like at least if it's a positive versus like we're doing this in order to afford more tax cuts for billionaires.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. Like this is just like it's so regressive that like it's not even secret. Like it's straight up just a transfer from the literal poorest people in society to the richest, and like we're not even being hyperbolic when we say that. Like it's just that's mathematically how it works. And like at least if you want to play like devil's advocate and be like, oh well, like Biden spent all this money during COVID. It's like, yeah, we just got out of like a historic recession where the whole economy was shut down, and the idea was like, hey, let's juice employment to full employment. We've never done that before. And fact of the matter is we got to full employment. We're like, holy shit, we've never had employment this high. And it worked. But, then you had inflation and all these other things. But that's the point. Is like you got to weigh trade-offs. And I feel like eventually
And
Elon came to a point
interest,
of like,
what do people really care
yeah,
about? I think Democrats definitely thought everything, going back to the New Deal stuff, everything's about jobs and employment and unemployment levels. And
it's that P flip, right? It's
Yeah,
every
I
jobs,
kind
but
of
also
figured.
inflation.
I don't know. I figured out that was an interesting point. I didn't think about that. Democrats kind of thought of, oh, jobs, jobs, jobs. I mean, I didn't see it that way, because like most people fucking hate their jobs. Like I don't know. I think like having a
it's like
job is nice.
they don't want
but,
any
like,
job
they
necessarily.
don't want any
right?
job. Like I
Yeah.
don't blame them, but it's like I think most
Or
people
just any job.
The biggest thing I see people complain about is like cost of living. That's the number one thing. Number one thing by far.
Well, and it's
Yeah,
like,
and I mean, I
but this
guess
is,
you could make the argument that goes with jobs, and it's like, oh, if we raise the income level of jobs, but I don't think that hits people's minds. Like, I don't think people are able, and nor really, it's not like fair to expect them to be, where they're like, oh, well, yes, everything went up by 10%, but my income went up by 11%. So really, my purchasing power is the same. Like, it's a mental thing. It's seeing the numbers on the grocery store, seeing how much you're paying in rent.
Well, it's like that's the frustrating thing is like even if your income did go up or like your purchasing power like did adjust, it's like it's still uncomfortable. Again, it makes it like, okay, great, now you're making more, but what happens if you lose your job? Or like what happens with any number of things? Like, and, you have the double prong of like, oh, interest rates went up and inflation's up. So it's like getting money is more expensive. So like buying a house is not only more expensive because the house went up, but it's more expensive because the loan you will take has higher interest. And it's like, it just makes this awful cycle. Plus, it's the basics, like the highly visible price. Has highly visible prices of like eggs, gas, your rent. Like it's the stuff you see every day, and you're like, holy shit, look at that, And I think really, my other theory is that a lot of it comes from COVID because gas prices were like negative, right? Because it's like nobody's going anywhere, and so we kind of got used mentally to seeing like $2 gas and being like, oh, cool, like nobody has a job and we're all sitting at home.
But
like,
even before COVID, like at least when I first started driving, gas wasn't that bad in California. It was like $3.40 where I live. The
it's like high
Arco,
threes, yeah.
Dude, it got back down to that for a bit though.
Never,
No?
never,
Not
in,
threes.
at least where I lived, bro. I've never seen that Arco that I've. This is a single Arco, but I've never seen that Arco below. The lowest I've seen it is at $3.99 for like 2 weeks. It's always been like
Really?
$4.30. At least we're in Southern California, dude. I have not seen gas go back to even pre-COVID levels. Like,
Well, and the thing is like also, but like the worst part is like people blame that for like a lot of reasons, but like a lot of it comes from just production and like, state taxes and like how we create, we get gas in California. It's like we don't have pipelines that can bring it in cheaply. So of course it's going to be more. Like it's a whole very complex thing.
It's very like volatile. Yeah.
It's about the price of like a barrel of oil. And so like, that's why like, you remember gas, like after COVID, it's like all of a sudden it shot up. People were like, oh my God, gas is getting expensive. And it's like, okay, well, it was like almost $4. People are like, oh, it's like, whatever. It's expensive.
And you had
but
Ukraine
well, do you remember like when that happened? All of a sudden, like you could drive by a gas station, you could see it go up 5 cents, 10 cents, 15 cents. Like that was insane.
Yeah.
But when energy is more expensive, it has it's like a push inflation spiral, right? So like if it's more expensive to drive the cattle to the slaughterhouse, then it's more expensive to bring the beef to the plant, and it's like it's more expensive to drive to work and all these other things. It makes everything more expensive, so it has like that multiplier effect. Plus, like rent is just a very big chunk of your income. It's like all of this comes back to just the abundance, which is exactly what Ritchie Torres said. Had we, gotten laser focused on inflation in like 2021 or 2022, it'd be a very different story. But we didn't, and I don't understand why. I guess that's what I wish there was more books on or more articles like about. Why didn't anybody think about that?
Well, and I mean, I don't know. I think that there is a bit of an explanation. I know that Matt Iglesias was writing about this in the same topic, saying we need more books on this. And like the one thing that the Jake Tapper book didn't really address or couldn't address is like, what was the political impact of this? What was the policy impact of all of this? And I know that in the book, Michael Bennett was quoted as after he met with him, I believe, about some of the immigration stuff, he came away being like, oh, maybe part of the reason why none of this is like been handled properly or in the proper amount of time is because of the decline. It's because this is not someone who's equipped to like balance these 40 different things, and it's being delegated to staffers who kind of do want more open borders and don't really consider the political consequences the same that a Joe Biden of 2016 might have.
Well, and it makes sense. Like think of it like you're the most powerful person on planet Earth. You only get fed what people show you, and you're 82 years old. That's a recipe for insane groupthink. Like if they just tell you like, nope, the American people love you, and then you go to a rally and it's like all people cheering for you, like why would you think otherwise?
And we know that this was the case very explicitly in the post-debate fallout period, where they were hiding the polling numbers from him. The second that any of the like governors meeting with him tried to bring it up, they would end the meeting, and it came out that he hadn't seen most of this data, like most of the stuff Pelosi brought, the stuff Schumer brought, he hadn't even seen it. It was being hidden from him.
Yeah,
that's a little scary. I will say
it is.
It's a little scary.
It's like that scene.
I'm sorry. I would like a young president who can get information on his own, who can, dare I say, open Twitter or just Google something. What are my polling numbers? Like it's not asking for much for that.
Well, I mean, Wes Moore is looking better by the day, and if they do keep the primary map right now, South Carolina is the first state. Pretty big black population.
I think it's set to cut actually 2028. South
Carolina. They said they might. They're looking to change it and stuff, which I'm for. By the way,
isn't
South
Jamie
Carolina
Harrison
should not be first.
like
He's out.
He's been gone.
No, he's fully out, bro. He is still like he still defends. He's to this day he still tweets about how getting Biden off was like the bad choice. Like that was a bad decision.
I guess the thing is like, okay, just humor me. Why did they think that though? Like, I guess what is their point? Like, are they just
because they're so fucking entrenched in this bullshit? Like, they're actually so entrenched in it where like they legitimately think, oh, he beat Trump the first time. Oh my God, like there's no way he had it looked like disorder. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh my God, if Biden was a nominee, dude, we would have lost Michigan. The Senate seat in Michigan would have lost. The Senate seat in Wisconsin would have lost. I don't think Ruben Gallego would have been able to win either, to be honest.
No, I was going to say it was supposed to be like a 58 seat Senate majority for the Republicans. But I'm like,
dude,
but why?
I guess it's easy when there's no counterexample to like actually play out. Like it. I mean, I happen to think that this has more merit, but I mean, it is a little bit like the Bernie would have won in 2016 stuff of like, it's an easy claim to make because there really is no way to.
No, but I think, but
in this case, there's way better way because there's all the polls. But
the polls exactly, at least the polls with
I'm
Bernie.
not saying it's like as rational, but I think that they're tapping into a similar mindset.
But they can't even point to like a single poll that showed Biden was beating Trump. They'll
point to the 2020 election and pretend that that's a relevant statistic. But
but he underperformed in 2020. Like I was gonna say, like the whole thing was 2020. Like, they went in thinking it was gonna be like a 58 seat majority in the Senate, and like or 54 to 58, and then like Cunningham
I was
shits
telling
the bed.
all my friends we were getting Blexus.
Yeah, no, it was like Cal Cunningham in North Carolina shits the bed. But, a part of me starts to wonder, like, I think 4 more years, that might have been a better timeline. Because it's still,
1000%. I don't
yeah,
even think it's
yeah.
disputable. Yeah.
I mean, but like, I guess the only counter is like what happens in that timeline of like, we don't get the CHIPS Act, we don't get, IRA, we don't get like IIJ, we don't get any of that. And I guess what happens? Is it just like 4 more years of gridlock, but Trump gets stuck with inflation, I guess, but then
I think
the
it's
border
that,
crisis,
and then I think we get a Pete Buttigieg type,
Okay, Pete
like
Buttigieg is
technocrat
not going to be
Democrat
the fucking
figure.
nominee.
Yeah, but in the alternate scenario where Trump was president for 4 years under inflation from 2020 on, I think that would have been a much more realistic, and I think it would have probably led to some sort of like more technocrat like type Democrat, and they probably would have eventually then, I guess, right now and for the next 4 years have done things like the CHIPS Act, I would think. So,
well, I guess like would we have kept the Senate then if Trump wins? Like I'm assuming we lose the Senate still and
You
lose the
definitely lose the
House.
Senate. Yeah.
I would say,
I
or
don't
we
think you win
wouldn't
Georgia.
get it.
yeah, what were the swing seats in the Senate that year that got
It was
rid of it? 'Cause
Maine,
50-50
North
with-
Carolina.
or I guess it was
there
the runoff that actually won it for us. We had the 2
Yeah,
runoffs.
so we
Yeah.
would have
Georgia.
won the runoffs. Yeah.
No, because like the
Well,
runoffs would have been
actually, that's the weird
post-election.
thing is normally you would think it would be the opposite effect where it's like that's the first resistance you can do, but obviously it was a weird one because Trump was doing all the fraud. But so I wonder if it was if Trump had won, would Democrats have fired up to vote in that runoff? I mean,
probably.
well, but
I mean, I would assume so.
probably wouldn't have made the runoff because I think he made it by like half.
Yeah, he made it by
I was gonna say,
sliver.
yeah.
I don't think he would have made it either. Yeah, so I think
yeah, because he wouldn't
Well,
have
who
carried.
knows?
I mean, like
Alternative history. There's a point of
a book,
talking about it, but
a
there's
book,
also like,
a book,
who
about
gives a
that.
fuck?
I wish there was more.
But I will say, Westmore was in South Carolina with Tim Walz. Personally, I don't think Tim is the guy. I'm gonna be real with you. He had that one. I don't know. Anyone from like the past ticket and the administration.
Let's
happen.
Let's just table this for 2 years until like a primary happens and we see.
Yeah,
because
I'm sure Westmore was
out
out there, and I sent you guys a little clip. He said we should be the party of doing stuff. We should actually get shit done. And
okay, well let's tell him to do stuff.
He's been doing stuff
in
Maryland.
Like what?
He just restructured their
Mond ask.
Yeah, he just restructured. He
yeah.
actually took a pretty big political hit. He restructured their entire budget, had to raise some taxes on the rich, cut a few things to balance the budget. So they have a balanced budget now. They were looking at a pretty bad deficit. He also streamlined a lot of like infrastructure projects, and then he vetoed. It's very interesting. He actually vetoed
the reparations study,
reparations study package because he was like, "Hey, look, like I think we should have an approach that helps everyone, lifts up everyone." And then also, just I know you guys are big fans of the abundance movement, but he was their first guest. I think it's pretty cool for like Westmore to go on Armand's like podcast, his first ever guest. I think that's pretty baller. So, pretty cool guys.
That is my version of the purity test stuff from 2020. Now, it's
it's like did you go on
crazy
abundance
position. It's did you go on some abundance related podcast? But
no, but he's saying he's not gonna run, but I call bullshit.
Oh, a likely thing for a guy who's running to say. But before we wrap, I think we should talk about the bill in more full in a future episode, especially once we figure out if it's going to get shrunk down by some of this Elon backlash. But I'm wondering, like, let's end with what is your guys' prediction for the Elon stuff? Like, where does this go a year from now or 3 years from now in the next election? Like, is it plausible that it reaches a point where he just says fuck it and is drugged up on ketamine and annoyed at Trump for doing some bill that undoes his work, and he's like, okay, if you don't undo this bill, I'm giving the Democratic Party or whoever the candidate is $1 billion in the next election. Like, probably unlikely, but what do you guys see of where does Elon go from here politically?
There's so many different opportunities for him to go. I don't think he will leave. I think he will just kind of keep picking fights with the administration, but still be on their side, because I think there's not a home for him on the other side. Like, we would not welcome him back, but I think he isn't really willing to burn the bridge completely with the other side. And who knows, he's on like all these drugs and whatnot. So like maybe he decides, fuck it, I'm just going to do it, and doesn't look back. Honestly, I feel like he would go like and try to fund like a third party or something like that. Like I don't see him really wanting to do this long term. You know what I mean?
Which honestly might be more useful for Democrats than anything else.
I don't know. And I think the scary thing is that
Doge Party third ticket run.
Yeah, I mean, like crypto pro, like, I don't know, But it's interesting just because it's like it's the most powerful man on the planet beefing with the richest man on the planet. And I'm like, I feel like that's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
Yeah. Well, and the tweet where he calls it a disaster or a let me actually pull up the exact quote here. I want to read that tweet while we end here. So Elon's tweet was, "I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it." And obviously some of these like Elon Twitter stats or whatever seem a little fake sometimes, but that tweet does have like nearly 150 million views, and it clearly like had an effect on some things. Like I do think Elon is a figure in shaping some of this elite opinion in conservative circles and like staffer opinion. So I do think that
100%.
could be something to monitor, because I mean he could have said that in a lot less aggressive terms, which I think is interesting.
It's just one of those things of like, I feel like the like whole like tech right and like people that are like, oh, it's going to be a different Trump 2.0, like it's going to be, a whole different thing. It's like they've been wrong at every turn. Like I feel like they've just kind of sat down and gotten like put in the cuck chair. It's like, oh, we're going to unleash nuclear. And it's like, no, actually they gutted nuclear. It's like, okay, we're going to unleash solar. It's like, no, they gutted that too. Wind, nope, gutted it. AI, nope. Like maybe that's the only one that survives. And it's like, it's just sad because it's kind of like most people could have seen the writing on the wall, and like I'll bite. I'll say, you know what, I had hoped maybe they would have had more influence, and I was wrong, because I really thought that, what, if you gave Nice Cannon and the IFP like think tanks a little bit more power instead of traditional Trumpies, it's like maybe it'd be a much better country right where we're at. But instead, nope, it's Peter Navarro and tariffs and just incoherent nonsense.
Well, I just sent you guys the meme he posted,
Oh,
and we'll put that on the screen. But I think my hope for the next year and the next 3 years is these memes start getting more and more extreme, and it ends with him posting some incredibly cringe meme that somehow tells people to vote for Democrats in the midterm to get revenge on Republicans. That's my hope cast. But we
Works for
shall
us.
see.
perfect.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well,
We'll
thank
catch
you
you later.
guys for listening. Hope you enjoyed. Have a good one.
Thanks so much.
Lots of fun episodes to come.